Hi, I'm Brooke Starr. I'm the state senator from Senate District 12, representing Polk and Yamhill County. Welcome to the Starr Chamber. Today we have a really fantastic conversation with my daughter, Brooke Starr. We're going to call it the Brooke Cast. Brooke has had an interesting journey in Washington, D.C., and has taken her own path to public service. So we're going to explore that a little bit, talk a little bit about her growing up as a daughter of a state legislator and what that meant, and a little bit of our family legacy. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation. Stay tuned. We are ready to roll. Are you ready to roll?
Yep.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so excited. This is so fun. I get to have my own daughter on the podcast, the Starr Chamber. Imagine that.
Lucky you.
Lucky, blessed. Holy smokes. This is very, very cool. So we're just going to have a conversation, talk about a few things, and we'll see where it goes.
Sounds good.
So it was awesome having you and Brett on the Senate floor with me today. Grown-up adult human beings. The last time you were on the Senate floor with your dad, how old were you?
The last time I was 16.
16.
But I think when we started, I must have been 5 or 6 at the time when you first got in.
When I went to the Senate, I started in the Senate in 2003. So you would have been 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I started in the House, you were 2 years old.
Yeah, I got drugged to a lot of political events.
Yeah.
It was the baby that a lot of politicians kiss, probably.
Something like that. Yeah. When I first campaigned, I was carrying you in my arms.
I think I have a picture with George Bush, maybe, or somebody.
I don't know if it was Bush.
Definitely Gordon Smith.
Definitely Gordon Smith. Yeah, for sure. So, you and your brother grew up kind of in the Capitol building. I on the Senate floor told a little bit of that. You have any memories of the Capitol building when you were little?
Yes. One day in particular, Brett and I were running around. You had 2 rules for us first. The first rule was that we had to stay together and we weren't allowed to leave the Capitol building. So we would always go to the caucus room and get candy there, and we could just walk in and say, "We are Senator Starr's kids," and they let us take whatever we want. And then one day, one of your friends, Daryl Fuller, lobbyist around the Capitol, told us how to get to the top of the dome where the Gold Man was. So we ran up there, and that was one of the coolest experiences I've had being there. But we knew that building inside and out.
Yeah, you knew all the the back passageways, the secret corridors that the public generally doesn't see.
Yeah, we had a great time. Growing up there was really special, and I don't think I took it for granted, but I didn't really understand fully what a life in public service meant at the time that I appreciate a lot now.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I remember, swearing in days, when we start having you and Brett and Mom with me on the floor. Those were special times.
Yeah, it's crazy back then. Your little side guest chair, Brett and I used to fit on that together.
Yeah. And
sit there and eat candy out of your desk drawer.
Yep, exactly right. So, as a family, I obviously have a heritage of public service. Your grandfather and your grandmother both served in various capacities. Obviously, I think your dad, me, and uncles on our side of the family, and all find different ways to serve. What's that mean to you?
I think you and grandfather especially, and grandmother as well, instilled in me just a love for public service. I saw that with grandfather and with you in the capacity of actually serving in the legislature, but grandmother was more of the behind the scenes support system for you. And that's kind of what I feel like my role is now, is I'm still a public servant, but I work to wholeheartedly support the person that I'm working for. But I think that was the most important, and just love of your community and wanting to give back to your community and doing whatever you can to benefit the constituents that you serve, while also just keeping God at the center of all of it.
Yeah, that's cool. So you're currently working in Washington. So how did you originally land in Washington, D.C.? What precipitated that whole part of your life?
Yeah. So when I was graduating from high school, I had a decision to make. I got into GW on the East Coast and Pepperdine on the West Coast. And we had a split household. Mom really wanted me to go to Pepperdine, selfishly, so I could be by Disneyland. And you really wanted me to go to GW. And I remember seeing a picture at grandma and grandfather's house of you in a GW sweatshirt. And I was like, well, first, it made sense for what I wanted to do. I didn't know necessarily that I wanted to be in politics. I thought I wanted to serve maybe at the State Department or international capacity for the country. But ended up going with GW because I knew it kind of had that political itch and I wanted to be kind of in the center of it all. And it kind of was just cool to be there because I was like, you got to kind of live vicariously through me and my experiences. And I chose to go there and study international affairs and French, having been grown up going to French immersion school. So I landed at one of the best schools. It's so convenient to DC, right in the middle of the action.
Right.
But I loved the campus and I loved the access that I had to different job opportunities living there.
So GW, for folks that don't know, is located in the Foggy Bottom part of Washington, D.C., but it's really right in the heart of the city.
Yeah, it's super accessible to everything. So when I was at GW, my goal, I didn't intern anywhere the first semester, but my goal the rest of the time I was in college was to figure out what I wanted to do long term. So I tried to intern different places every single semester.
So you interned on Capitol Hill for Congressman Greg Walden.
Yep. I interned for Greg for 2 different semesters. I was there in the spring, and I was one of the only interns that they had that spring. So I was given like 3 tours a day, was given pretty nice responsibility. They trusted me, which was good. I mean, part of the fact was I came from a great family name. So Greg immediately knew me and my family and our legacy, which was really special. And they ended up hiring me over the summer. They were missing a staff assistant. So I got to do really hands-on work for them then and kind of become a staff member in the meantime. But that was my experience in the House. I also interned for Senator Sass from Nebraska in the Senate. So I got a little bit of exposure to the Senate. I ended up working there like I do now. And then I also worked at the National Conference of State Legislatures.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's where you got your start as an intern.
Yeah, that was my first job, and it paid as an intern, which was really special. But yeah, I worked under one of your good friends, Max Belkey, at the time, and got to do substantial work there too. I was really liked that place, but I kind of figured that kind of work wasn't for me. So I ruled that out. I enjoyed what I did, but I was like, I don't want to do that long term. I really enjoyed interning in Congress. I thought that was just really exciting. You never knew who you're going to run into. There's always excitement happening. That was during the first Trump administration when I was an intern in Greg's office. I also ended up doing the Koch internship program, and I interned at the Cato Institute through that.
Right.
Learned that I don't like think tank work and that I'm not a libertarian. And then my senior year, I spent that whole year at Americans for Tax Reform, working on like digital issues for them and state affairs. And then I did some tech policy for them too. Yeah. So, and then I loved working with ATR, but I knew I wanted to go back to Capitol Hill.
Right.
After the fact.
Yeah. So you're wrapping up your college experience as a senior at GW, getting a degree in international affairs with a focus on French, and interning at ATR. And I believe you got a job offer from ATR.
Yep. They maybe 2 months before I graduated, they offered me the operations director job there. And probably the same week that they gave me that job offer, I just popped into Greg's office to say hi and catch up with the team. They had an office dog, Ted, who was the best. So I've had to come meet Ted. And when I was there, that visit, the scheduler at the time told me, hey, the chief of staff wants to talk to you. I said, okay. So I go in there and she says, our scheduler right now is going to get her master's degree. Would you like to interview to be our scheduler? And at the time, I was terrified because I remember interning. That was the one job that I told myself I would never want. It's a hard job. It's thankless some of the time. If you work for a great member, it makes it a lot better. And obviously, Greg was phenomenal. He was one of the best congressmen to ever serve the state. So I remember I did a lap with one of the legislative assistants, and she was like, "You could do this job." And she explained to me kind of what the role entailed and everything. So I ended up sitting down with Greg, went over a couple things, and got hired. So I got to be his last scheduler in the House because he ended up retiring the following year.
Right.
So I always reminded him too. He didn't appreciate this very much, but I told him once, Congressman, I was 1 year old when you were elected. Now I'm your scheduler.
Yeah, well, yeah, sometimes we don't need to remind everybody how long we've been involved in the process. I have that experience here in the state legislature. So you had all of that experience while you're in school, all those intern experiences, and you over time kind of winnowed it down to what you really enjoyed. And when that opportunity came, you jumped at it to work with Congressman Walden.
Yeah, and I ended up liking scheduling a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
Being the support staff for a member that you wholeheartedly believe in is really rewarding. The feeling when you accomplish a day and they did every single thing they were supposed to do and you ran mostly on time is a great feeling.
Mostly on time.
Yeah. A little buffer time here and there.
Mostly on time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we know as being part of this legislative process that the calendar or the clock doesn't always cooperate when you're on a Senate floor, on the House floor debating issues. So
that's why being persuasive and being very kind to people helps when you're running a little bit behind.
Yep. No doubt.
You have to have good people skills.
Yeah. So Greg retired and so there went your job.
Yeah. So luckily we found out, I started with him in April of 2019 and we found out that October. So we had a good amount of time to kind of start looking.
A little more than a year.
Yeah. And I ended up staying till the very end. I didn't want them to be left high and dry. It was kind of during COVID too. So it was actually right when COVID started.
Right.
So I remember working on a lot of side projects, a lot of legacy projects for him during that time. But yeah, I stayed till the end. And one of my connections that I actually met through my predecessor in that office told me that 2 congressmen were hiring at the time, Adam Kinzinger and Markwayne Mullin. Markwayne Mullin, I ended up interviewing with him first, thankfully. Because that turned out really, really well. I interviewed with him in November of 2020. He called me the next week and offered me the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I started as his scheduler that December, and I dual scheduled for him and Greg for a month, which was crazy.
I remember that.
I had 3 phones for a very brief period of time.
Over the course of the holidays. I remember you being home with 3 phones and Greg on one hand and Senator Markwayne Mullin on the other.
Not yet Senator.
Not yet Senator.
But
right.
yeah, that ended up coming to fruition in 2021 to 2022.
Right. So if I remember correctly, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but Congressman Markwayne Mullin, he was a member of the committee that Greg chaired, was he not?
Energy and Commerce.
Okay.
And Markwayne served for 10 years in the House before moving over to the Senate.
Okay.
So 5 different terms.
And he's from Oklahoma.
Yep. He represented Oklahoma District 2 at the time, which is just the eastern part of the state, everything east of Tulsa.
Yeah. Okay. So people remember how Oklahoma is formed.
Mm-hmm.
It's one part of the state. So, so you took the exact same job in Congressman Mullin's office that you had for Congressman Walden.
Yes.
But it's a whole new state, whole new set of issues, whole new set of people.
Very friendly to Republicans, though, which was nice.
That is true. Yeah.
A change from being the only, at that time, I mean, it's still today, but there was only 5 congressional districts back then, but we were the only Republican district. So we got calls from everywhere, all over the state.
When you worked for Greg.
When I worked for Greg.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you're in the heart of very red Oklahoma.
Yep. 77 out of 77 counties went for President Trump.
Yeah.
So we have lots of love down there.
Yeah. Well, that's great. And so Senator Mullin, currently Senator Mullin, was able to become the senator because Senator Inhofe retired?
Yes. Yeah. So he retired, stepped down. And we filled a special election seat.
So there was a special election where Congressman Mullin ran for the Senate and won that special election.
Yeah. Yes. Really, really big primary. And we ended up going into a runoff and then won in the end. Senator
Mullin has a interesting background himself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is still the only congressman or senator that's ever been a mixed martial arts fighter?
That is correct. Yeah, he's 5-0 in mixed martial arts. And he's not the only small business owner in the Senate right now, but he is one of few. He sold the companies, but he's still over Mullin Plumbing in Oklahoma and a couple different entities that they run in the state. So has the businessman mindset, which I think a lot of politicians are lacking in DC.
Yeah.
And that's what President Trump has as well.
Right. Yeah. So Senator Mullin has that really unique story where, took over a family business because of an illness, I think, something like that.
Yeah. So his dad got sick. So he dropped out of school at the time, took over Mullin Plumbing and turned it into a multi-million-dollar corporation that services the entire state of Oklahoma.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of great examples of hard work in my life. You, Mom, my grandparents, all included. And he is also just the definition of a hardworking man and motivates all of us to want to do our best too.
Yeah. It's got a great wife and family.
Absolutely. They're the best.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sayings he says is God, family, everybody else. So it makes it, the scheduling job is still difficult and I run operations for the office now, but it makes his priorities are so clear that it makes the job easier. And I feel like that's the same way that you operated when you were in.
So you went from scheduling for Congressman Walden, scheduling for Congressman Mullin to scheduling for Senator Mullin.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
So, I took on the title of operations director when I was in the House with him and took over. Yeah. So like the March of the next year, I was working for him. I started managing our staff assistant and our intern program. And then I held on to that title moving over to the Senate. I ran our transition to the Senate. And then being an operations director in the Senate means not only do I oversee the scheduling operation of the office, but I also run the administrative branch of the office. So payroll, budgeting, anything the staff need, I'm the go-to for. And then I also recently started our member services program as well.
So you have quite a lot of responsibility.
Yes, but I have a wonderful team that helps me. I have 4 staff that I'm responsible for that all contribute so much, and they're all from Oklahoma. So I have to, whenever I get asked from constituents if I'm from the state, I kind of have a line now that I use. I say, I'm from Oregon, but I was raised right. So it puts them at ease. That's
perfect.
Yeah.
So you are, I tell you all the time that you have a front row seat to history. So, and Senator Mullin is very active on social media and very active in legislating, getting a lot of cool stuff done. But you get to see that right up close and personal.
I get to see it and I get to do the behind the scenes planning of it. So when it gets executed and he gives a great speech or he gets to go to the White House, it's really neat to have been involved in all of the planning that led up to that.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff in DC that I've lived through the last 10 years almost. There's never a dull moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've gotten the chance to do a lot of really interesting, cool things being out there.
Yeah, it's especially. We obviously have the White House is Republican, Congress, the House is Republican, the Senate's Republican. So the ability to actually get things accomplished, it's got to be pretty fulfilling.
Absolutely. This is the first time that I have been a staff member working in the majority. And it's wonderful because we get a lot of stuff done. We're working hard to deliver for the American people. At the same time, we have a lot of obligations that we didn't have before. We have to preside a couple times a week over Senate business, so that eats up 3 hours of our time. You can't proxy vote in committee hearings because they need every single Republican vote to be there. Obviously, you get called to the White House all the time, and we never want to decline any of those invitations. So our priorities are a little bit different, but first and foremost, his job there is to vote, and then everything else comes next.
Yeah. Well, so if there are young women that are watching this, what kind of advice would you have for, a young lady that's in high school maybe, or in college that's thinking about, the opportunity to do an internship in Washington, D.C., or pursue some sort of career in public service? What kind of advice would you provide to those young ladies that might be watching or listening?
Yeah. So first of all, I'd say if you have the opportunity to intern or work in D.C., jump at it. Most internships pay out there now, and so you can have a wage to take care of your living and transportation. and such. So if you have that opportunity, take it. Because even if you don't end up liking the work on Capitol Hill, you meet such an incredible network and community of people, depending on what office you're in and what your interests are. That would be my first piece of advice is if you had that opportunity, take it. Because even if you don't like it, the gain and what you're going to benefit from in it. I used to be very shy and didn't really have confidence in myself, and working on the Hill and getting the opportunity to be treated as a real member of the staff and people cared about my opinions and what I thought about things. Like all of that helped grow my confidence immensely. One of my favorite things I tell my staff and myself frequently is that if you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing. So get yourself out of your comfort zone and take that leap and see where it'll take you, especially if you have a heart for public service or if you're interested in serving this country in any way.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice. Do you have any specific story or circumstance or something that's occurred that you think would be interesting to share?
There's so many things that come to mind.
Anything that you can share with us?
It's true. Like I've really gotten to experience so many cool things on the Hill. But one thing that comes to mind is obviously I wish that it wasn't the case in this circumstance, but for President Biden's inauguration in 2020 to 2021, I got to serve on JASIC, which is the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies. And I got to be a doorkeeper. So the morning of the inauguration, I was there at like 4 a.m.
Wow.
And I was in charge of one of the doors that, like, I remember Dick Cheney walked through. Like, I got to see all of the presidents walk through the doors. And I also got to sit on the platform that day and watch the inauguration. I remember seeing myself on TV and I was like, this is pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
I got to see Garth Brooks live too, which was awesome.
Yeah.
So it was one of those like kind of once in a lifetime things. Like I might get to go to another one, but not in that same capacity where I got to like be front center.
And as much as we didn't love the fact that Joe Biden was the president, it's still the circumstance, and it is America where we inaugurate presidents and we have that peaceful transfer of power, and you were able to really see that right up close and personal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Getting to travel with Senator Mullin around the state too, around the country, has been really fun. I love seeing him in those settings. He's just so authentic and genuine, and it just reminds me why I got into this in the first place. Working for people like that, as great as him and Greg, really is not only rewarding but very motivating too. So
I'm going to tell you one story that I have. When I had the opportunity, it was before 9/11, but it was 2000. I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and meet President George W. Bush. Mm-hmm. Small group. There's probably 10 or 12 legislators. We're sitting around a conference table, and in walks the president and, shakes all of our hands. And he sits down and we have really just a normal conversation. Obviously, we're talking about state issues with the president of the United States. Yeah. And the thing that I came away from that interaction with is like, the president is kind of just like the rest of us. While obviously has an immense amount of authority but was just, I felt like kind of a regular guy.
That's refreshing.
And it seems like the more you get to know, individuals who are in elected office, legislators like I serve, members of Congress. I mean, you've gotten to know, obviously, the two members that you've worked closely with, mm-hmm. and have regular lives, regular wives, families, the same kind of challenges, pressures that average, ordinary Americans have.
I think that's what makes them so not only reachable, but they understand what you're going through.
Yeah.
And they want to help you.
Yeah. I think that makes all the difference.
Absolutely.
And here in Salem, the state capital, we are, to a large degree, continue to be citizen legislators where, absolutely. It's not a full-time job. It can be. I mean, it's a lot of time, especially when we're in session. It's obviously different in DC, where it is 100% of your time. I mean, I watch you in your home, you're on the phone with your staff members, the senator calls, it doesn't matter what time, day or night, your phone is on. And, obviously when we're on the West Coast and they're on the East Coast, it can be early in the morning here when your phone rings.
I don't mind working 6 to 2 when I'm over here. It's not bad, but it's kind of one of those jobs that you have to be on 24/7, but when you're able to take a break.
Right.
So kickstarting this year, Leader Thune had us in for 10 weeks of sessions straight. We got a lot done. We got a lot of nominees passed. We established the president's cabinet in the fastest time the Senate's ever done so. But you're right. It is a nonstop job that I kind of have to be mindful of to maintain that work-life balance. I have to make time to work out, have time to call my parents, and to take care of myself.
Right.
While also being like entirely dedicated to my job.
Yeah. 24/7 almost.
Yeah. Especially with the boss I have now. He's all over the place.
Yeah. It's fun to watch when you text your mom and I and say, hey, Senator Mullin's going to be on Fox News or it's going to be on with Hannity or whoever, the opportunity to flip on the TV and see him, speak. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's been doing a lot of media recently, and it's been awesome because people get to know him really well, especially on his social media pages. He gets personal with folks because he wants people to understand who he is and what they're going through. Because again, he's just a regular person.
So there was that incident with the Teamsters union guy. Did that?
I should have mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, Sean O'Brien? Sean O'Brien.
We call him Teamster SOB. That's his Twitter handle, I think. So, yeah. Not offensive.
But they've, after their little dust up in the committee, they've maintained a relationship to some degree.
Absolutely. So, yeah, committee hearing happened. That was a result of Mr. O'Brien had testified in a previous hearing, and after that, him and my boss got in a little bit of a Twitter spat, and he threatened Markwayne. He goes, anytime, any place, cowboy. And, being a good old boy from Oklahoma, you're not going to let that slide.
Right.
So, yeah,
stand your butt up.
He stand your butt up. Was a wedding ring off. So it obviously went viral. But he stood up for his values and he made a great point. That's what most Oklahomans would want him to do.
Right.
Not stand down to a bully. So that incident happened. President Trump ended up calling him kind of into the election year, the next year, because Sean O'Brien ended up being a pretty decent supporter of President Trump just because of his stance on labor and unions.
Right.
So President Trump called both of them separately and said, I need you guys to bury the hatchet and move on from this. So I remember I scheduled them at this little hole-in-the-wall Italian restaurant in D.C., and apparently when the boss walked in, Mr. O'Brien stood right up, shook his hand, and apologized. He provided context to say that he hadn't read Markwayne's bio ahead of the hearing, and so he didn't understand. He called him a greedy, self-made or millionaire or whatever.
Right.
When in reality, he took over his family's business and basically started it from scratch.
Right.
So he apologized. They had a great meal, and then now they're best friends. Yeah. They talk almost every day. They text. Yeah. They helped both get Lori Chavez DeRemer across the finish line for labor secretary, which was really awesome for not only her but for the state. Oregon's only. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Absolutely. So no, they have a great relationship now, which is just funny compared to where they were that year.
Yeah. No, that was fun. I mean, it's fun to watch, and I'm sure it was a big hit for the constituents back in Oklahoma. They're
absolutely
like, that's our guy.
Yeah.
Doing what we would do. What we would do.
Yeah, he's had a couple of viral moments over the years. Most notably this year, him defending Pete Hegseth for DOD secretary. Yes. He's been really good about calling out the hypocrisy in the Democrat Party, I think.
Yeah.
So that was part of why he went viral for the Pete stuff. But ever since then, we've just been really active on explaining our message and explaining why what we are doing is right and what we need to be doing.
Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Really appreciate you engaging like this. So you've been in D.C. since
2015.
2015.
I know.
10 years.
I don't feel like it's been that long.
Are you going to come back to Oregon?
Republican politics are hard in Oregon.
There you go. Don't we know it?
But I always love to visit, and I love getting to spend time with you and Mom and Brett. And it kind of helps me bring me back to my roots. Like, I definitely am thankful for the upbringing that I had, and just the impact that your public service and the way that we were raised has had on my life. I don't think I'd be where I am today without that upbringing and without that example and role model in my life. So
No,
thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
It's
That's
true.
very nice. All right. Thanks, Brooke.
Thank you.